when we work with the material of the world, we are also tapping into something transcendent and something divine, that there's some sort of essence within that. And through it, it becomes this sort of embodied spiritual practice too.
Yeah.
Or to change that material, the alchemists also had to embody those changes themselves. So they
Welcome to Soror Mystica, a podcast exploring life's mysteries and magic through its symbols.
I'm Mariana Lewis, an archetypal tarotist.
And I'm astrologer Christina Farella.
And just as the Soror Mystica guided the alchemist through his holy work, we hope to be your mystic sisters in these conversations, guiding you deeper into the symbolic life. Hey everyone, welcome to the 48th episode of Soror Mystica. This is an extra special episode because we're shaking things up a little bit in a very exciting way. Before we get into the episode today, which is all about alchemy, which is very, very, very thrilling. I've been dying to talk about alchemy forever. I want to make the big announcement that the Archetypal Tarot School is back. So that is my signature class that I teach once a year. That is like everything I know about tarot and the world of archetypes and Jungian psychology and how it all comes together, talking about myth and, the hero's journey and archetypal numerology, and also the techniques of reading cards as a story, as your own personal myth. This is my big class that I teach. I love it. It's a 10-week program, and it is starting September 7th. So this is the official announcement that the doors are open. We're going to hopefully sell out. So if you are thinking about learning more about the tarot and you actually want to take a deeper approach to the tarot, you don't just want to get another guidebook reiteration of the same old things, go take a look at it sooner rather than later. Also, because there is a very special early bird bonus that I give, where I give my free Archetypal Tarot Elements Ebook, where I have a breakdown with keywords and all the archetypal elements of each of the 78 cards in a nice little ebook format. And that's free when you sign up, if you sign up before, I believe, August 25th. So that's the big announcement that I have. I'm very excited. I've been thinking about this all summer. I've been prepping for it. So I hope you join the 2025 class. So now that I've told you that, I want to introduce someone extremely special. Alyssa Polizzi is here with me today, being my guest co-host for the day. So Christina is having the most intense summer of her life. She's got a lot of projects going on, one of them being the Ethereal Visions Musica Universalis astrology deck, which they had a Kickstarter this spring. So if you haven't checked that out, I think the Kickstarter is closed now, but just look it up. See if you can get your hands on it at some point. This deck is going to be gorgeous and amazing. And if you were part of the Kickstarter like I was, congratulations. You should be as excited as I am about it coming out. But she's working on that. She's working on a whole bunch of other projects. So she is on some strict deadlines. And I wanted to just make sure we get an episode out there. So Alyssa was kind enough to come on and be my guest today. And actually, Christina and I have been talking about having you as a guest forever anyway. So hello. Hi. How are you doing? How are you today?
I'm great. And it's very exciting to be here on Soror Mystica.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard of Alyssa before, she is an incredible Jungian thinker. She's a writer and a teacher. She teaches on things on depth psychology, and she teaches a lot about alchemy and dreams and tarot. And she's also my own tarot reader. And it has been a long time. So we are she's just so brilliant. And she has a platform called the Artemisian on Substack, which is, she has classes and essays that she posts on all these topics that are so deep and refreshing and insightful. It's insane. It's the kind of work where you read it and you're like, oh my God. And you have big clicks. So it's not fluffy stuff. She thinks hard about stuff, and she produces really excellent content and material all the time. So we've been friends. We met on Instagram,
I know,
actually.
yeah, we did.
Years ago, and we've been friends now a long time. So I'm very, very glad that she shares all of her brilliant stuff, and I'm always impressed by her. So if you haven't looked at the Artemisian on Substack yet, please do. Please check that out. So we usually start off with what we're reading. Are you reading anything right now?
I am, actually. I recently picked up Cosmos and Psyche by your
Oh my God. Yeah, I have that on my shelf. I read like 20 pages of it and I was like, there's no way. There's no way I'm getting past one more page.
You gotta get past like the first part, because the like philosophical layout that he does is like, ooh, this is some heavy stuff. But that's kind of his style.
Yeah.
And then he starts to get into, I mean, if you don't know the book, it's basically about his experience with astrology and how he went from being a skeptic to a total believer in it, in the sense of how it represents the archetypal reality of the world, and how the planets play this part really in mirroring these shifts, these archetypal dynamics. And he traces different historical dynamics against these different movements of, like, you know, planetary movements, and how that might have played into something like the French Revolution or whatnot. And so it's a really compelling book, especially for someone like me who's not like Christina and does not have a deep relationship to astrology. I've always felt like of all my archetypal interests, astrology has just been on the back burner.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
No, I get it. It's like a whole other archetypal language to take on. So it feels intimidating.
It's a little overwhelming, and it's so deep and so interwoven, and there's different types of, you know, astrology practices, and I just like, I deer in headlights, and I don't know what to do. And I am really drawn to the depth psychological approach, which tends to be called archetypal astrology. And I think Tarnis's book is one of the fundamental texts of that approach. So I've been working my way through it, and there's especially like the core section when he starts to really get into the planets and you know, the relationship and how he's understanding it. That feels so, it's like taking a drink of water after being parched for so long. It's so refreshing. It's so deep. Well,
I'm glad that you can jump in first, so that I feel now more confident that I could do it. I read his Passion of the Western Mind.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I read it in a summer, and that thing, right before I went to grad school, I was going to study Western intellectual traditions, and I was like, this is probably the text I should read before I go in, which is basically an entire summary of Western thought. That's what this book is. And it was so much. But then when I got to the last chapter, I was actually crying. I was crying because of how much this man like was able to weave all of these patterns of thought into like a paradigm of belief that was founded in the feminine too. It was like, he's like a really, really excellent and intriguing writer. But he's a little bit too smart for his own good. So it's like hard to get through it sometimes. So I will definitely add that back to my list. Very cool. I've been like on a reading streak this summer. Actually, I think I have on Goodreads, I have like a challenge that I give to myself of like, I'm going to read 20 books this year or 30 books this year or whatever. And I'm 5 books ahead of schedule because I don't know what has happened to me. So I've been doing great. And I'm actually right in the middle of Nancy Qualls Corbett, The Sacred Prostitute. Have you read that one before?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't read it.
It's really kind of refreshing too, because she's a little like, she pushes back a little bit against some of the standard ideas of like the feminine in that school of Jungian thinkers. So like she has some like newer thoughts about things, and she puts it in a really nice way, and she brings in a lot of feeling. So that book is basically on the archetype of the sacred prostitute, which is essentially a variation of like the priestess archetype, which I've been thinking about a lot lately. In a more like Eros oriented way, in a way that's connected to body and sensuality and love. So I've been doing that. And I've also been reading, I picked up a random novel called The Green Darkness which it was supposed to be a romance novel written in the 70s. That's like these two people fall in love, and then they have like a past life that they have to remember in order to like reconcile their love. And so that's been my guilty pleasure, which is not so guilty. It's actually very boring. But I'm getting through it. I was like, I need a romance. That's what I need. But I'm like 450 pages in, and I'm like, no one's kissed anyone.
Yeah.
What's going on? So
a bit of fiction to balance out those other heavy books we tend to read.
Yeah. And then I always pick fiction that's like 700 pages long. And then I'm like, why did I do that? Why am I here? But yeah, it's important to balance it. So, okay. So today we are talking about alchemy. And you have such a rich take on alchemy, so much information. And I'm really, really glad that like this is the topic that we're covering together. So for a lot of people out there, I think are super interested in alchemy, like it's a buzzword, right? And I'm sure you like me probably hear it a lot and then get like agitated because it's like, well, but there's actually, it's a process. It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Yeah. So you have a much deeper knowledge of alchemy than I do. And I sometimes feel like I have a little bit of a handle of what's going on with alchemy, but even like way more. So one of the things that we can think about with alchemy is that it's in essence, it is a practice, a school of thought, a study that is super ancient, obviously has been around a really long time, but has most of its kind of work that we know of at least done in like 500 years ago in like the Renaissance, post-Renaissance period. And so we can think of it, it feels very much like it is the metaphor of the path of individuation, which is why it's so exciting, especially since we're looking at things written in like the 16th century or 17th century. And it's like, how did they talk about these things in the way that we might talk about them today in like esoteric circles and like, the way that Jung talked about it. He was so excited by alchemy because he was like, here's what I've been saying, guys, look, it's already here. I actually got to go to his library when I went to the museum in Switzerland, and he has like all these original manuscripts, alchemical manuscripts that I don't think all of them have even been like transcribed digitally. I think like he's the only one who has these things or something. And there's just like stacks and stacks of them. So he really was a very avid collector of alchemical thought. So I'd love to know, like, starting off, what's your thought about like, what is alchemy's meaning for us? Like, why is it something important for us today? Why is it worth like rediscovering and kind of investigating?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to think about alchemy as an archetypal system or an archetypal school of thought, just as how you use tarot or Christina uses astrology, or you might work with myths and fairy tales or work with your dreams. The same images and processes and dynamics spoken about in alchemy have psychological significance because the alchemists were drawing from deep within the psyche, even as they were working with material in their labs. And that's sort of what Jung puts forth, is that alchemy had this double face, that they were doing the laboratory work, that they were experimenting with metals and matter and all of these different dynamics. And then at the same time, because there was sort of this, there were these, this liminal mindset between inner and outer, or the above and the below, or spirit and matter. Those elements were blended for at least most of the alchemists. And so because of that, when they would experiment, they would also tap into aspects of the deep psyche, so that the images and symbols that they painted in their manuscripts have this uncanny sort of similarity to other images and symbols that we see in mythology or in things like tarot and astrology. And because of that, it has this psychological significance for us. And then we can use it as a map for not only understanding the psyche, but developing it, transforming it.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. It's one of the things I think that really confuses people about alchemy is like that it actually was a process. Like it was a thing that they did.
It was a real thing.
It was a real thing that had steps, which are confusing. And like that's a thing that I think is you Google it, you're going to get a lot of different information out there on the internet, because something that we have to know about this like school of research, this study, is that it wasn't uniform. It wasn't like science where it's like, oh, here's what we know and everybody now knows this, right? It was something where they were very much testing stuff. And I will say also about alchemy, it was a pseudoscience. Like, it wasn't something at the time period where they were like, oh, that's like occult nonsense. A little bit, but then there was also a lot of people who were actually trying to learn stuff scientifically.
Absolutely.
Like Paracelsus is known for doing a lot of alchemy, and he also did a lot of science. He was trying to do a lot of science. So, there are foundations in scientific study in it. But then a lot of them went a little bit off to their own like little world of like, well, what does this mean esoterically, internally, immanently and transcendently? What does all of this mean? So I think that, we can say that the steps of alchemy are, that's a whole other topic. Like, you could teach classes and classes on it, but the steps of alchemy there is a process. There's a process of distillation and calcification and sublimation. I don't know the order of them, but the whole thing of like, we're starting off with a substance, we're doing stuff to the substance, we're trying to change the substance. And then the more that they did this, the more they were like, oh, wait a second. They started to bring in mystical components to it, mythological components, symbolic images and stuff that went far beyond just like, oh, we're working with lead here, or we're working with stuff. And it became this thing. But yes, there are stages of alchemy. It was a process. There was an actual physical art to the thing. Yeah.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that alchemy, I think, sort of grew out of these practices like metallurgy or embalming, creation of dyes, medicinal arts, all these ways in which we were trying to understand the material around us and to work with it, to deepen it, to transform it. And then especially in the Western tradition, in the sort of like medieval Renaissance period, in mostly in Europe, you start to see this like hyper focus on, turning lead into gold or developing the philosopher's stone. But there's so many traditions, Chinese alchemy in the Middle East, alchemy in India, alchemy in Europe. But at the center of it is this sort of belief that when we work with the material of the world, we are also tapping into something transcendent and something divine, that there's some sort of essence within that. And through it, it becomes this sort of embodied spiritual practice too. Or to change that material, the alchemists also had to embody those changes themselves. So they might, fast or only experiment, at this moon phase or things like that. And it really kind of taps you into that in between realm. And I think from a depth psychological, from a Jungian perspective, we're always trying to get into that liminal space or the bridge between conscious and unconscious, because that's where the growth happens. That's where expansion happens. That's where, that's where the depth is, right?
Yeah. Beautifully said. Something that has been, I was just reading about Julian of Norwich, who is a medieval mystic woman, 14th century, I believe, maybe late 13th century she was born. And she writes a lot about the motherhood of God, which is just extraordinary. But she writes also a lot about the oneing, as she puts it, like ONEING, oneing, she made up this word, of God and people, and also body and soul, body and spirit, right? And so this is very revolutionary in the medieval era, right? That soul and body are very different. In fact, body is something to be overcome so that the soul can be liberated and then get to heaven. But this is something that I find so interesting in alchemy, because they have a very similar idea where there is a theme of overcoming matter, right? Or like manipulating matter, changing matter, because they're trying to change it for their like desired outcome. But really what they're recognizing is that matter and spirit, the material pursuits and the spiritual ones, are co-current. They're happening at the same time. So by doing this material process, this physical process, they are also doing something psycho-spiritually. And so it's very interesting that this, in the Christian world, and a Platonic world too, a Neoplatonic landscape where they have this dualistic soul, body, all these things are kind of split, that there was this like counterculture of like oneness and the mirroring of these two things happening at the same time. I find that to be really so fascinating, that there's like this thing there of like the body and the soul, or the matter and spirit, they're not different. What's the quote? I think it's, I don't know if it's Marie-Louise von Franz or Jung who says that. I think they're quoting some other text, but it's like, the point of alchemy is to release the spirit trapped in matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like there's this, and I think this is like very specific to the Western tradition. And we can sort of see that then as like the underbelly of, you know, a predominantly Christian world that is especially as like cast out animism and pagan, you know, spiritual beliefs, you know, but that something was pulling through all of it, that all of matter carried this essential aliveness or a spark or a spirit or an essence, but in its material form that we encountered it in, it was sort of trapped within that. And it needed to go through this transformational process to be redeemed or to be transmuted or elevated to its higher principle, which is why you want to take something like lead and turn it into gold. But that pursuit, you know, allowed them to start experimenting with all sorts of different chemicals. And it actually allowed them to, you know, discover the technology of science today, which is why alchemy is considered to be this like precursor to chemistry. It was because of this belief that there was something within matter itself that meant to be discovered and uncovered and redeemed, that we were able to get to this point that we are now.
Something that I think we should also touch upon, because it's another huge part of alchemy that confuses people a lot, is that, so there's the lead and gold thing. Everyone kind of knows about that one, or that idea of it, which actually I just saw something. I wish I like made a mental note of where I saw this, that they have actually turned lead into gold. Like they had they did something in like a very particular experiment where they were trying to change this lead atom or whatever, and they did it for like 0.1 second or something.
Weird. Okay, interesting.
Like
so the alchemists were right.
I don't know. I have to find where I saw this. It may have been fake news. I don't know. I was caught. I was like, what? And then I was like distracted by something else. And then when I opened Instagram again, the thing was gone. The like news alert. I don't know where I saw this. Probably fake news, but hey, you don't know. Maybe it's real. But they also worked a lot with the prima materia. It's like a really important thing in alchemy. This is also part of the spiritual side of it too. And that's a phrase that we hear a lot, and is also something that doesn't feel very clear to people. What can you tell us about the prima materia? What is it?
It means primary material or first material, and it's what the alchemists experimented on. And it was like, what are you experimenting with? What are you taking into the vessel? What is the focus of both your practical efforts and your spiritual efforts? And the prima materia could be something like a metal. It could be tin, or it could be lead. It could be, you know, something that you found in the landscape, like maybe a flower, and you want to try to work with it and extract its essence or something like that. And you see this a lot, that, you know, the darker and more corrupt and the more cast out your prima materia was, the better, because it was that which, and that might be something like, you know, the dead body of an animal or urine or something like that, that holds that potential for transformation, even in the darkest and lowest of materials, which is why the prima materia works as such a wonderful analog for our psychological material that we're
Yeah.
bringing into inner work or into analysis, into therapy. It's like that which is the most shadowed, that which is the most rejected, you know, the stone that was rejected is the cornerstone of, you know, the temple, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like that thing that you don't want to look at might actually hold the seeds for this powerful transformational substance that is the philosopher's stone. So that prima materia is that which you focus on, that which you take into your experimentation. And I view it psychologically as that kind of initial condition or the thing that sets you off. Maybe it's a depression, maybe it's a desire or a goal, maybe it's that wound that just won't heal.
Yeah.
And you can bring that into your inner work, you know, container to develop, and likely something will come out of it through experimentation that will be a new resource, a new attitude, something like that.
That's really beautiful. So one of the things that Jung did, Jung like hated to make like charts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not like here's how to do it. Let me make you a little diagram.
There are no diagrams, and there's like maybe one or two, but there's really not many.
Probably Yolanda Jacobi did those for him, but I don't think he was messing around with diagrams.
Can I point something out really quick?
Yeah.
Okay, this is like a newer book that was published through the Philemon Foundation. It's called Consciousness and the Unconscious, and I recommended it in an article recently about where to begin with Jungian psychology because it has diagrams, and it's a series of lectures from Jung at a university, and there were diagrams like woven into the lectures, and they had note of them, and it's put into this book. So if you want diagrams, you got to go check out that
fantastic
book.
I did not know about this. I will have to look this up.
It's so good.
Everyone always asks me, and I'm like, man and his symbols, but then there's a little part of me that's like, are you going to get through man and his symbols? Because even that is like a little, it's totally readable, but it's also Jung. So Jung tends to say stuff and you're like, just give me a picture, please. Love of God. Draw something. Eric Neumann loves diagrams, which is why I really like the Great Mother book that he put out, because I'm like, well, at least I can look at something and have half a sense of what you're talking about. But one of the things that he did do, I don't know if he came up with this himself or if someone pressured him to, is to have like a 4-stage process of alchemy where it's like there's steps, right? So there's something that and this is not like the actual stages. The actual stages themselves can be, there's many of them. Sometimes there's 7, sometimes there's 12. Like there's not one way, right? But he kind of came up with this 4-part thing of individuation as a whole, looking at how individuation happens through an alchemical, like, metaphor. And he came up with the stages of the Negredo, the Albedo, the Citrinitas, and the Rubedo. So what that means is the Negredo is the blackening, the stage of confession. Then we have the Negredo, which is the whitening, the stage of elucidation. Then the Citrinitas, the yellowing, the stage of education. And then the Rubedo, the final stage, is the reddening and the transformation. And I find this very interesting. And I've worked with that a lot, thinking about shadow work, because I think that we can take this idea and it still feels kind of abstract. And so whenever people ask me, like, I have this thing, I pull cards around it, like, how do I work with it? How do I do the shadow work? And I was like, well, like, shadow work is I get very nervous when people tell other people how to do shadow work, because I'm like, shadow work is the whole point. It's the individuation process. So there's no like, here's your steps. However, that framework that Jung puts out, I think, is very useful in how we think about it. So let's say you pull a card, with the tarot, or you have a thing that's going on. As you said, you have a wound that won't close and it keeps coming up, and maybe it's like around love or something. And every time you think about dating, you get panicked or something happens and you're like, what do I do? How do I change this? I like to think about that stage of confession being that moment of saying, let me put it all out. Like, let me get this whole thing out. Let me understand what it feels like, understand what it looks like. What are the patterns? What do I do? Let me kind of confess the whole thing. Then the next stage of that elucidation, that albedo, is like, well, let me purify. So there's a need to release. With shadow always comes shame. It's like they're hand in hand. Even if it's a golden shadow, even if it's a piece of shadow that's like a good thing, there's still shame of like, how did I abandon that part of myself? Why did I not take care of myself in this way? So there's always this kind of need for this purification, this sense of bringing light, elucidating, really like seeing it, shining the light on it. That albedo stage, I really connect with like the temperance card of like feeling like there's this peace, there's this kind of serenity that kind of comes in. Then when we have the education part, the Citrinitas, that's where we actually start to try to learn about what is going on. What's the deeper thing? Why do I have this wound in the past? I understand, but why does that now make me act this way with new partners? Or why does that make me so panicked? So we actually go out there and try to learn about it. We try, maybe that's in therapy. Maybe that is through a very conscious journaling process, which will be slow, by the way. All of this we're talking about being over months, maybe years, right? Or this is not something you do in a weekend. And then once you have a little bit more of that education, you have a little bit of a deeper understanding, you kind of see it. You have that yellowing, that like sun comes out a little bit. That's when you have the opportunity for transformation.
Right.
It's only at that point. So when we're working with shadow, this is the stages, the metaphor I really like to use about what that process looks like. We have to first get it out. We have to see it, look at it confess it as much as we can. Remove the shame, remove all the stuff, because that's how we go right back into repressing it if we don't have that purification moment. Then we do the learning process and the studying process with a little bit of objectivity, a little bit of curiosity. And then when we see it, then we say, I can maybe change something here. I maybe have some consciousness and power in this that I didn't realize I have, or now I have that I didn't have before.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about starting to use an alchemical framework is that it comes with it implied processes or images and symbols that we see sort of repeated across a lot of different manuscripts, because the alchemists were talking about the Negredo stage or the Albedo stage, or trying to get over to Rubedo. And there tends to be, it's like disclaimer, alchemy is not straightforward. They didn't agree. It was not a clean system. We already kind of touched into that. So as you said, some say there's 4 stages, some say there's 12, some say there's 50, some say it's only these operations you do. So with that aside, there are certain patterns. So one of the patterns, for example, is that the Negredo, that initial stage of blackening, tends to be associated with the operations of fire, calcinario, or potentially with the water operation solutio, things dissolving, and with symbols like the raven. Or a crow, or with skeletons, or with a figure of death with a scythe. And so you can kind of work with that initial stage of Negredo and maybe even start to pay attention to similar elements that might show up like in a dream, as an example. Like you're standing in a graveyard, it's like that the psyche's in that Negredo moment. How might you work with those images and symbols, or what processes might you need to, transformative fire, need to bring that in? I think that way alchemy can kind of provide some structure, some holding, at least some imaginal depth to the work that can feel so overwhelming. And there are ways to find that information, but I will say it's not easy, because there isn't a ton of information out there on alchemy that is as streamlined. Even from the Jungian perspective, it's a little tough to find it, but it is there. Or I think, at least with my work, like I'm attempting to make that a little bit more accessible and, provide sort of like inner work tools that we can use.
Yeah, well, your work is so wonderful for that, because it is, even if you try to go out there and read like the Jungian books on alchemy, you're gonna get everyone has like a different take, or they are just regurgitating Jung and Jung's take, and it's just like, well, there's nothing new here. Why don't we just read Jung, or just read von Franz, because she kind of was a little bit more prolific about it than even Jung was. But it's just it's hard to get information that feels concrete and is not just one of the big criticisms that I have internally secretly about Jungians is that they will take anything and make it fit whatever they want it to. A lot. They're just like, this means this. And you're like, that really does sound true. But also, what if it doesn't at all? Or if it means like something totally different? Like, okay, alchemy, like everything fits. Everything fits the way they want it to. So, it's hard to get good, like, researched facts in some of these things. And all of these things are, not all of them, but most of them are written like 50 years ago or more. So that's why I always liked your work so much, with alchemy, you always bring a fresh perspective, and it's not just like, oh, here's what Jung said. And you're always like, you have really good research.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that with the, you know, the looking at the more mystical side of alchemy, which is the part that excites people most. I did a paper in college, in my grad program, on necromancy and alchemy and Renaissance music. I don't remember what the hell it was about. Who knows what it was about? But I was in a weird class that was like magic and Renaissance music, because there was a lot of occult studies that incorporated things like astrological music and stuff like that. So the class was like looking at this, and I listened to Michael Myers' Atlanta Fugians on repeat endlessly. And I was like, what the hell is this about? I don't get it. There's so many weird things out there. There's like weird like plays that they've written, and then there's weird like operas, and it goes haywire when you really get into the weeds of it. But there's certain symbols that appear again and again and again. One of them being the Ouroboros. This is a very common one in alchemy. And like, so that idea is about oneness and the wholeness of everything coming together. But I wonder what like are the main mystical symbols that you find in alchemy, or what are the biggest themes that you see there?
I mean, the Ouroboros is a really important one to keep in mind, and you were capturing that with, it's like the principle of life and death sort of contained within itself, or sometimes speaking to like the cyclical nature of the alchemical work, and how, you know, the process is constantly giving life to itself. And you'll see, you know, these tail biting serpents, or one serpent biting the other one, or a dragon biting the other one. So that's a really important symbol. The philosopher's stone, that's another like, ooh, like,
yep.
People
Harry
hear
Potter.
that. Harry Potter. But does anyone know what it means?
You? Sorry.
No,
you see my tattoo
no,
that I got a while ago? It's all tilted here because I'm twisting my arm. Well, this is the squaring of the circle symbol, which is used a lot in alchemy, and everyone asks me if it's Harry Potter.
Oh no!
And I get so upset. Like, it's not Harry Potter. Harry Potter took that from alchemy. That's J.K. Rowling stealing that from alchemy.
That's right.
It's very upsetting to me. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, but
No, it's okay.
Harry Potter and alchemy, I don't know if she did a good thing or a bad thing with bringing that in, but it really gets me sometimes.
Yeah. But yeah, the philosopher's stone is, you know, the ideal, the goal of alchemy, and it's sort of this elusive goal that no alchemist can ever truly achieve, which is why it's such like a perfect mirror for individuation of like the ultimate aim, you know, that place of wholeness and realization and ultimate transformation. And yet you never actually get there, but it's the journey through that transformational process, the constant cyclical spiraling journey that gets you closer and closer to it. And so, and what's interesting too about the Philosopher's Stone is that it had this quality of, once it was obtained, it could transform other things around it, or it could heal it. It could do all sorts of interesting things.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been meaning to either teach on this or write more about it, but I think, you know, that element of the Philosopher's Stone, that which when realized can change other things around it, can be likened to a kind of integration of like a new attitude or a new aspect of self that can turn towards these other like psychic dynamics and bring about, you know, that shift of perspective, you know. So it's like when you level up in a way and you heal something, integrate something, that then allows you to, you know, oh, here's like this, you know, self-deceptive part that comes up, and you can turn towards it and kind of soften it, or, you know, show it a new path. And so it can represent that which has the potentiality to perpetuate change and transformation. Like it grows and compounds on itself, which is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, that is really interesting. The idea that it's like this magic, like button almost
Mm-hmm.
to be like, meet this where it is. And
Yeah.
what do we need to do immediately to shift it, change it, experience it in a new way so that transformation or change is really possible. I really, really find that fascinating, thinking of it like that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times one of the main themes that we see in alchemy that feels very different from like the philosopher's stone or the panacea or you know, these like kind of objects or things, like a discovery of a thing, like a magic thing, is the idea of what Jung called the mysterium conjunctionis, right? The idea of the conjunction, the things coming together, which is very connected to the Ouroboros, but also a little bit separate. We see this represented often in this image of the rebus, which is called the rebus, which is basically the single-bodied person that has a head of a man and a woman, whereas both man and woman. It's like the
like
merging of masculine.
Yeah,
exactly.
figure.
Yeah. The merging of masculine and feminine. And a lot of times we'll see the man with the sun on his head and the woman with a moon on her head. So like there's also the merging of sun and moon, Luna, Sol. So in terms of that side of alchemy, that's definitely on the more mystical side, because no alchemist was like, how do we merge people into one being? They weren't Frankensteins out there. But there's this kind of spiritual meeting of the other or the opposites, which I find really interesting. What do you think about that as like what the thoughts you have?
I mean, Jung wrote a whole book on it, and it's like his final you know, the final book he wrote, and maybe something that he was probably working on though for like 30 plus years.
So spooky like that. He loves to just, it's very up Jung's alley to be like, last thing they're right. Most mystical of them all. Yeah,
seriously. And so in the book, like he's exploring a lot of ways in which the Mysterium Conjunctionis is depicted in alchemical manuscripts. So whether, you know, is it a king and a queen? Is it the sun and moon? Is it even maybe like the alchemists themselves and the Soror, right? You know, that are coming together in that. And what is this mysterious conjunction? What is their meaning? And he especially, I think, held on to that idea because it reflects his idea of the opposites so well in his psychology, and how important it is to kind of recognize and understand the opposites, and at the same time have something transcendent that emerges between them, because alchemy kind of shows the tension and the push and pull between trying to bring seemingly disparate aspects together, and that there can, through an alchemical process, be a joining. And then you have those images of, as you mentioned, the rebus. Sometimes it's an actual child, like the philosopher's child. So you'll see a little baby in between the king and the queen, or you'll see, like in the Rosarium Philosophorum, a king and a queen, and then they interact, and then they're in a bath, and then they die, and then they're merged, then they die again. And so you're seeing this continuation of what it means to bring in pieces of ourselves or aspects of the spirit that seem seemingly irreconcilable. And I think from a Jungian perspective, it's always like the seemingly irreconcilable thing is actually the path towards reconciliation. You know,
very annoying of Jung whenever I'm like, my analyst will sometimes be like, well, this is the tension of the opposites, isn't it? I was like, thank you.
But
I know.
What do I do about it?
What do I do? It sucks.
It sucks. Oh, just wait around. It'll come. Hold on. That's right. You got to hold the tension of the opposites.
The transcendent function is coming any day now.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes I feel like I don't know if it is. But what's cool about alchemy is it tells you that you can participate in that process. And I think that's what's interesting. Not to say Jungians are saying you can't participate in it, but I think sometimes there is this sort of, you're waiting for the grace of the unconscious to present you with the uniting symbol. What I think is cool, and I just wrote a whole article, it's called Archetypal Inner Work, about this idea. And because I'm going to like butcher this quote, but von Franz was saying that, you know, their whole effort in Jungian analysis is to try to connect people to an archetypal experience, because that is the healing factor. And you only get that by the grace, basically, of the gods, of the unconscious. And I'm like, true, but we can appeal, we can co-create, we can create conditions to actually kind of bring forth archetypal material
Yep.
or archetypal dynamics. And within that, you actually can maybe sort of usher in, we might say then, the transcendent, experience that unites that tension and brings forth an integration. And I think that's why I love alchemy, because it says, the alchemists were in the labs doing the work, experimenting, operating on their material to bring forth that conjunction that was stable. And they did that. It allowed them to create things like amalgams, or, to, blend together two chemicals and actually to form a stable combination. And thus suddenly we have chemistry, right?
Yeah.
But psychologically, it's true too. We don't have to just wait around and hope the unconscious delivers this like wonderful healing experience. And I think that's why for me, I align more with this tradition, and this is what I said in the article, of diviners and oracles and seers and alchemists, I should have said too, because they are engaging directly with those archetypal frameworks or with the unconscious to create the conditions for those things to arise. Because if we just sit around waiting, hoping the mysterious conjunction is going to happen, it might, but it might also take a really long time.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think that like there's this in the, von Franz and Jung and all these people were writing in a time where most people were entirely unconscious of at least they weren't thinking in these symbolic ways, in these archetypal ways. I was just reading Ursula K. Le Guin, fantasy writer, and she has a series of essays about fantasy, and it's great. It's a great book. And she has an essay called Why Americans Are Afraid of Dragons. And she basically says, the American man is worshiping capitalism, and he cannot dare to imagine a reality that is not his reality. He can't, and there is a reality in dragons. These are real things. They are more real than the stock market. And it's true, because what dragons are is the archetypal realm. Like when we read fantasy and things like this, we like go right into the archetypal because we take out the real world. Take out the concrete world. So it's like we're in an archetypal landscape. That automatically. So this, we have, I think in the last 100 years or so, we have the conscious choice now. We're like, we want to enter this world mindfully, thoughtfully, the way the alchemists were trying to do, and the way that the, Hermetic philosophers were trying to do, and all these, and the depth psychologists. So I think, this is a lot of what people are seeking spiritually. It's why people listen to this podcast, right? This is why people do the work. And so I think that you're totally right. I think that there is activity. Sometimes there is waiting. Hangman tells us that too. Sometimes there is just, sorry, babe, you're here. You don't know. Your ego is trying real hard to know, but you don't know. So sit tight. But then I think you're totally right. There are times where it's like, no, let's enter the landscape. Let's seek the symbols. Let's do the reading. Let's explore this territory and see what is waiting for us. And I also think you're right that a lot of times the whole point is to go on the seeking, to to say, I'm the hero of the journey and I have to dive into it and not just wait for the grace of the gods to find me. I have to find the gods to go into their domain. So I think, I think we've done a really good job with an introduction to alchemy. It's obviously a massive topic, everybody. There's really so many things to talk about with it. But these are like, I think we hit on like a lot of the key points. So if you are interested in an alchemy part 2, let me know, because I would really be curious to see if people want to keep talking about it, or if it was just us nerding out over alchemy and everyone's like, oh, come on, talk about something else. Who knows? I don't know. So let me know. And also I want to let you know that Alyssa has so much good programming. Like she has a robust amount of material she puts out, educational material. So I want you to tell us what's going on next. What do you have on offer so that people can check it out?
Yeah. Well, in regards to alchemy, I'm actually teaching a workshop, and this is unique because it's in person, where I live in the Bay Area in Berkeley, California, at a place called the Alembic. So very alchemy themed. I'm teaching my alchemical inner work technique, which is all about taking these ideas and applying it to our self-development and being inspired by the alchemical images and symbols and processes, and kind of engaging it in an imaginal landscape. So there is streaming tickets available if you want to watch live from your computer, or if you happen to be in the Bay Area. So maybe we'll include a link for that. It's
Yes,
happening
definitely.
next month,
That's so cool.
August 9th. But every month over on my Substack, Armisian, I am running programs on all sorts of different subjects. Alchemy, tarot, myth, fairy tales, dreams, all woven with Jungian psychology in service to inner work. So you're welcome to come hang out with us there, join the membership to attend classes, or read my articles. Lots of new material coming out each week.
Yeah, the material is as I said, like of the highest quality. It's really just the kind of stuff you read and you're like, damn, this girl's smart.
Thank you.
So it's like, you always know the person's smart when I'm jealous. I'm like, oh, smart. God, my
That's
Scorpio
how I
comes
feel
out.
about you, Marina. Okay. I'm a Scorpio too. I'm a Scorpio rising.
There you go. Exactly. It's like, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on to a dream, which is great because you are also a dream queen. So let's do a dream. If you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to leave a review or learn more about how you can support us on Mighty Networks, where you can get access to some exciting exclusive offerings. Or you can connect with us by sharing a symbolic experience, whether from a dream or synchronicity, for us to explore on the show. Thank you to today's sharer, and please tell us your symbolic experience or connect with us on our website, sorormysticapodcast.com.
Are you a small business looking to reach a targeted audience of people interested in all things esoteric? If this sounds like you, Soror Mystica would love to invite you to become an ad partner. We offer a highly tailored audience of mindful, curious, depth-seeking listeners, and we would be delighted to showcase your business and offerings to new hearts and new minds. Simply fill out an advertiser application form at our website, linked in the show notes below, or navigate to sorormysticapodcast.com/advertise with us.
So our dreamer writes, I dreamt I was the king of a castle. It was essentially Hogwarts Castle. Oh God, with more Harry Potter. Okay. But it wasn't a school. It was just like the castle. An army invaded the castle, and my knights and I went to get our weapons from the armory. But all the weapons were made of floppy rubber. I looked out the window of the hut and I saw soldiers terrorizing the villagers. Some enemy soldiers spotted us through the window and entered the armory. We pushed past them and fled into the forbidden forest. We recruited the magical creatures to our cause, and I rode back to the castle on the back of a giant spider. But then I thought, if everyone saw me riding on the giant spider, they might think I was an evil king. So I found a white horse to ride instead. My knights and the magical creatures and I came and freed the villagers and took back the castle from the enemy army. It felt really good.
Wow.
What a story.
Yeah.
What a dream you had, dreamer. I am very impressed. Oh, and this person is a woman too, so they felt very kind of interested by that when they woke up, that they fight very hard against the monarchy. This is what they thought when they woke up. So they were surprised that they were a king. I love when dreams flip your gender. I find that to be very exciting. Like psychologically, first of all, it takes you out of the ego. Like just very staunch, like this is who I am, and all of a sudden you're in a different body and a different like life, and so you're still you, but there's something about it that is, we have to look at it really differently. But this is a whole hero's journey. That this person goes on in this dream. It's like a full fairy tale. It's kind of wild. I think that the very first, there's several like big themes and symbols in here. First, that we're talking about a king. So we're talking about some kind of masculine image of nobility, right? A high kind of noble male thing. And then we have like themes of impotence. With the weapons being rubber, floppy rubber. If this was Freud analyzing this, he'd go to town. Field day, guys. Penis envy. Yeah. I don't think we're going there. No, thank you. but it's really interesting. It's like this impotent thing. I am the king, and yet I don't have a sword that functions.
Yeah.
And then, but you do manage to save the people. Like you recruit people to the task. You gather the allies.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that interests me the most is that you go into the forest, you get your allies, and when you ride back on a spider, and you have to switch to a white horse, like classic, like white knight, because you are afraid of being thought of as an evil king. You don't want to be seen as the evil king because you're the good king, but you also got on the spider. So I don't know, where does your mind go? What's the kind of first thing you think?
Well, the king is a really interesting and very powerful symbol. Shows up a lot in alchemy.
Yeah.
And fairy tales, things like that. You know, from a really classic Jungian perspective, the king is usually seen as like the dominant ego perspective or a kind of ruling identity structure. And usually it's in, you know, alchemy or in fairy tales, it's in some sort of fall where there's princelings that have to take over, or you see the king getting cooked in the alchemical manuscript.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it speaks to that which we are operating from the conscious perspective that needs to go through its own process of change or evolution or transformation. And it makes me think about this dreamer's conscious orientation, that which is most readily available, that which they lead the charge with. And you brought up such a good point about there being this kind of impotence, but you know, moving into the forbidden forest is like, okay, like, or something about the ego needing to dive into the unconscious perhaps for resource, because whatever is consciously accessible, the rubber weapons or whatever, right? They're not up to the task. There's something in the depths, you know, in the forest as a really typical symbol of the unconscious, you know, that needing to gather resources, especially ones that feel like outside of oneself. It's not the king who went in and transformed and came out by himself, you know, so it sounds like there's a task here for the dreamer about that dive into the unconscious. But, and I feel very curious about the switch with the spider and the white horse, because that feels just like Hillman is like, I don't trust the ego's perspective.
Oh, me neither. Yeah, I don't trust that at all. My first instinct with that is that you don't, the dreamer does not say that they were on the spider and they were like, oh, I don't like being on this spider. This spider is evil, or I'm uncomfortable, or I'm scared now. It seems like she rode the spider and she was like, chill, this is fine. We're friends. And then it's like, oh, I don't want to be perceived as the one with the spider.
Perception.
So there's something to me that's very curious about retrieving some kind, because spiders are a very complex symbol. There's a lot of things that we can pull. We can associate them with the feminine sometimes. We can associate them with shadow. Certainly they are like bugs, dark creatures, you know, they scare us. So there could be a lot of different ways to take it, but it feels to me like it is like a little bit of like shadow or something that we pull out that is like a friend that is actually helping. There's something powerful in that thing. And like, if we rode that wave, that there might be something very interesting that came, but then there's the perception, the ego's like, ooh, no, don't see me as this thing. See me as the classic, perfect king on the white horse. So yeah, I'm also I'm like, skeptical of that shift.
It feels motivated by something that perhaps plays out in the dreamer's life, where maybe they find themselves just naturally or implicitly just like molding themselves to an image of what they think is acceptable or what people would perceive as okay. And it's like, maybe that's because they've been conditioned to that. You know, maybe it's because they play it out within themselves because there's something so disowned, like the spider aspect. And so how might this dream be calling you to notice what that is, and to, I don't know, more confidently and consciously choose to move with the spider? You know, what does that spider mean for you, the dreamer? I'm very curious.
I would definitely start there and start exploring like how would the dream, a little act of imagination, asking like, how would the dream be different if I stayed on that spider to switch? I'm also thinking of the myth of Arachne,
Yeah. Yeah.
who I think she gets turned into a spider because she says, I'm the best weaver in the world.
Yeah,
And
right.
Athena, I
Yeah.
think it's Athena who comes
It's
down and is
Athena.
like, girl,
No.
what, how dare
Yeah.
you? I'm a good weaver. I'm the best weaver. And she's like, no, you're not. And then, she gets turned into a spider for having the hubris of like kind of challenging, Athena's gift, even
Yeah.
though she's probably right. Like that's the kind of other things. Like she's really good. So I think that there's, something about that where the I don't know, the spider feels very powerful. Like there is power
Yeah.
in that. There's a little bit of hubris, but again,
Mm.
I'm not alarmed by that. I feel like it's interesting. There's something to reclaim in shadow. And as you said, I wonder if there's a little bit of how the dreamer in their conscious life feels like they need to be the image of the good thing, the
Right.
image of the
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
thing,
Right.
of
The
like,
White Knight.
I'm the white knight. But then the spider's saying, you got some other power here that you're kind of, as you said, disowning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also, I think that this feeling of saving the villagers, this moment of saving the villagers is interesting. I always find it kind of interesting in dreams where we're like saving other people, like
Mm-hmm.
we're being the hero to other people, or we're doing something for somebody else, and there's
Yep.
like a reward we get from that. How do you connect to that idea of saving the people?
Well, it makes me wonder if I'm viewing the dream and all the parts of the dream as part of the dreamer themselves, what part of themselves feels like it's in need.
Yeah.
And how are you sort of rallying one part of you that seems resourced enough, kind of like the king,
Yeah.
to work on behalf of that which is in need and running into issues with it. And what's interesting is the dream clearly shows that you can actually complete this cycle
Yeah.
and be successful at it, although implied in it are some maybe challenges or certain things that can be shifted or changed, things like that. But that need, that kind of something that's lost, something that's in trouble, to me really calls attention to that which is under resourced, or that which has been cast aside, or that which gets overwhelmed by something more powerful. So where is that in psyche, or where is that in life experience?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think, you're totally right that the king reaches immediately for the weapon that they know. And then it's not going to work, right?
Right.
There's the need to enter the unconscious to find newer, probably better tools, resources, energies, archetypal things. And I don't know, I just get the sense in this dream that there's something about shadow and power and kind of
Mm-hmm.
mystery,
Yeah.
that, and very feminine, that kind of
Yeah.
comes through.
Yeah.
And I wonder too if the reason that it had to be a king is because there is a part of the psyche, right? We have complexes.
Mm-hmm.
And so complexes are the pockets of personality that we act out unconsciously. And I wonder if there's a question of what part of you feels like they have to be the white knight, or acts like the white knight or the king. And so that complex got the highlight in the dream. That's something I would ask too, because there's obviously a party that needs to fight for something, save something, be the hero in the dream. And that you have the success at the end, but it's by finding new resources and engaging with the unconscious, and not just saying like, oh, this is what I'm good at. This is what I know. This is how I do it. Wow, this was quite a dream. Thank you for sending this. We haven't had a dream like this. I don't think we've ever had a full fairy tale as a dream before. So I'm also very envious that I can't dream like this. I don't I have like dreams. It's like I'm offering orange chapstick to the goddess. And I'm like, what? Why am I doing that? What's that about? So congratulations. You have had a great dream. Enjoy it. Okay. So thank you so much, Alyssa, for hanging out, being a guest host today, and maybe we'll have you back. And just go check out the Artemisian. It's excellent. It's really, really rich place. I just can't stop gushing about the quality of it. It's really good. And if you want to study tarot and you want to take it on the deeper archetypal perspective, or you want to take that lens, check out the Archetypal Tarot School. We talk about alchemy. We have a whole module where alchemy is one of our focuses. So, all right, everyone. enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us in our conversation today.
Please consider supporting the podcast by leaving a review and following Soror Mystica wherever you listen.
You can also become a more active supporter and a member of the Soror Mystica community by joining us on our Mighty Networks platform.
If you have a symbolic experience that you'd like to share with us for the podcast, you can tell us all about it at sorormysticapodcast.com.
The music for this podcast is written and performed by me, Mariana Lewis, with special thanks to Stefan Lewis. You can connect with both Christina and myself on Instagram and get to know our work by clicking on the links in the show notes.
As the alchemical motto goes, as above, so below, as within, so without.
May this ancient wisdom continue to guide you deeper.
Until next time, take good care.